Hi there, I'm Jake Beaumont Nesbitt from the International Music Managers Forum, and we're going to be looking at this time of crisis with an overview of the industry and what it means in the long term. It says in the description from this panel that I will be joined by wise and experienced speakers. We've got two speakers, one of them's wise and one of them's experienced, and I'll leave it to you guys to figure out which is which. Peter, can you just briefly introduce yourself, like a short?
Sure. I'm Peter Ostedt. I work as a manager and I do a lot of other things. I run a showcase festival called Future Echoes. I run a radio station in Canada. I do a distribution company as well, and we have a record label. My company has an umbrella with several companies. So yeah, I do a lot of things, but in this case, I'm a manager for it's 4 artists right now.
So multitasking and lots of exposure to different problems that we're facing at the moment.
Yeah.
Yep. So I have 2 projects right now. First of all, I'm a co-founder of Music Export Ukraine. That's the independent initiative that helps Ukrainian artists to promote themselves abroad. And then I also run a music consulting agency called Soundbus. We're mainly focused on capacity building, consulting, music industry educational initiatives. So yeah, that's the way it goes for us.
Excellent. At this time, we know that there's a crisis going on. We know that a lot of stuff stopped, particularly in the live sector. What are the things that either of you are doing at the moment to move things forward? What are the positive actions that you're doing? Rather than putting out fires, what are you doing to start things?
I mean, the thing I've been doing since I don't look that old, but I am old and I've been to the business quite a long time. And I was running, for example, an independent label with 9 employees when Napster hit in the 2000s. And I got the same feeling, but then it was only for the record labels, but it was the same feeling that nobody knew how it's going to go. Everything went digital and suddenly you lost more or less 80 to 90% of your income because no one was buying anything physical. What that taught me is more or less that, but out of the crisis, it becomes very much opportunities. It's building opportunities. And that was not the first crisis either. I mean, I've had several after that as well. And this crisis, I was more or less like, okay, it's another crisis. And I'm more or less preparing myself to be flexible. You need to be flexible to be able to jump on the opportunities this will have. It will create opportunities. We know that. That's the only thing that we will be sure of is that, yes, there will be opportunities. A lot of alliances that was before is going to be broken, not working. People are changing shares. People that you might know right now working in one place suddenly will appear somewhere else and give you another opportunities. It's just that to be able to get those opportunities to work, you have to be flexible. You have to think in other ways. And so what we are starting more or less was to plan what are the things that we think is going to happen after the pandemic, because it will blow out somewhere. Will it take 1 year? Will it take 2 years? We don't know. But what can we think going to happen? So, of course, one of the things was to start a new festival. That's and a new radio station. Why do you want to do that? And that's because it's like radio. We thought that, yes, right now people have more opportunities to listen to music. One of the things that we weren't wrong, because people start listening less to music, actually, what we have seen, but people have moved over to radio because they want a companionship with someone speaking between the songs. And we can also see that podcast has gone up. The other thing was a festival. Yes, we can plan this festival during the pandemic and be flexible with dates and other things. So we are ready when it actually can be done. We will be as ready as we can be to do it then. That's what the things we're doing right now.
So a couple of things there, talking of experience, that you've seen changes hit the industry before. They're usually unexpected, particularly digital disruption. The industry doesn't necessarily have the answers but something appears. Maybe it's from the outside. Someone brings something in, like iTunes and Apple. But things emerge with new opportunities, and some of the existing players change their roles. Dacia, in the Ukraine, people speaking from Sweden that invented pop music with ABBA and Max Martin, and very strong industry with a very established structure on that old model. So when Peter was facing disruption before, he's coming from a very secure castle as the old business model, the old industry, and this disruption's happening. He's like, yeah, we just roll with it. In Ukraine, you have a long history of creativity and building your artists up domestically, but there hasn't been the tradition of export success that you've seen in Sweden. And what do you think that, does it feel like the old way is being disrupted, or does it feel like you've been asked to pause all your activity while the virus passes through?
That's a nice question. I think that's actually a mix of everything. Because yes, at one point we had a vivid plan for 2020, and frankly speaking, I was overexcited about it. And then like 90% of those plans were collapsed. But the next thing that we've done is, yes, we actually thought of possibilities to adjust. And luckily, this fall we'll have some hybrid showcase festivals, for example, that will still take place. For example, Ukraine is one of focus countries at Waves Vienna this year. So we have around 6 Ukrainian acts performing, and we have some conference activities here and there. And that's actually a second year for us to cooperate with the Ukrainian Institute. So we're still trying to make that happen for Ukrainian acts in terms of European showcase festivals. But also we came up with some like more massive adjustments. For example, we launched an internship program at Music Export Ukraine. And at first we assumed that's a crazy thing to do because nothing happens, no offline events. What are we going to delegate? What are we going to teach? And like what our interns are about to do? But time flies. And apparently we had plenty of things to do. For example, we are launching this weekend Eastern European Academy that we're doing with 8 more countries. So we developed a program. Basically, it's all about the capacity building, especially now, because we need to figure out, I will say adjust plenty, like a lot of times, because I think this is something that all of us need to figure out how to do properly. We need to understand how to adjust our activities. So when we came up with an idea of, for example, Academy, we tried to think about clever topics and aspects that musicians need to consider trying to handle their careers during the lockdown. So actually we're covering everything except live industry in terms of the Academy, which is quite tricky, but an interesting challenge at this point.
Peter, with the things that you've tried that are new, that you're trying them because it's a time to try new things, could you have tried them had the lockdown not occurred? Are you looking at them thinking, like with the radio, this is something we should have done anyway?
Yes. I mean, I see the whole thing as an accelerator, more or less. The pandemic is accelerating things that would have happened anyway, but in a much faster speed. So of course, now instead of dealing with one problem at a time, yes, you get several at the same time. But I mean, for example, my friend started, since Sweden didn't have really a lockdown, we are allowed to have 50 people in meetings. Well, he thought that, okay, no other artist is going to have any summer concerts anyway, so why don't we just hire them out to people's back gardens for acoustic gigs, exclusively, where you can only sell 50 tickets. So you can book an artist for a lower fee than normal, but you can only sell 50 tickets. He has sold 10,000 concerts with quite big artists in Sweden. So many of the artists has come back to him and says like, I actually made more money this summer than I would ever did, because I mean, Sweden has maybe, I don't know, 100 festivals or something. They can't facilitate that many of these artists. So more artists got more opportunities. So in one way, and of course this concept, the audience love it because suddenly they can have their favorite star in their back garden playing acoustically, and they can actually wish for any songs they want. Not Alice, of course, but the other things. And that means that you get an experience. And of course, the artists can sell merch directly to them, and it has been a good experience. I think, though, this would have happened anyway, but the whole pandemic made the things accelerate, and people suddenly was more open to it. I mean, the booking agencies was a lot against it in the beginning, but when they saw that the other artists got a lot of money, they jumped their own artists from going bankruptcy. And so suddenly these artists that cost, 100,000 euros you can actually get him for 1,000 euros now, just for one gig. And that has changed the conception to it. So there's a lot of things, but yes, it is about the whole thing is moving forward in a faster way than you thought it would be. It would have happened anyway. Yeah.
So 2 points there. A lot of the discussion at the moment is that we're in lockdown, it's deadlocked, it's stopped, it's stalled, we have to wait. And you're saying, no, things were occurring anyway. The wave of change in the industry, not the wave of the pandemic, has accelerated, and here the change is arriving quickly. The other thing you're saying, which I find particularly interesting, thinking about what was changing before that we already saw that's now accelerated, is essentially you just described the segmentation of the live audience, so that the artist goes from playing a festival with 50 other artists and they're somewhere on that bill, and there is a bulk discount ticket. The festival is much cheaper than if you paid for gigs by all of those artists, so the consumer pays less and the money is then spread across all of the artists. You're saying that the artist takes a smaller audience, charges them a premium price, or has the ability to directly interact with them, build engagement, sell them merchandise. So we know that with the computer games, that a lot of people can play games for free, and then some people will spend 1 cent, some people will spend 10, and eventually you'll get someone spending 100 euros, and a small fraction of the people will sell 1,000 euros. So that business model that the music industry was always based on, we would sell CDs at this price, no matter what genre, what country you were in, it was the local price. And that transferred to streaming. We were obsessed with the streaming rate. How much is the rate in Ukraine versus Sweden? You're talking about something different, is zooming in on the artist. Dacia, with where you're building, looking at everything except live at the moment, how much are you thinking about that artist-fan relationship and giving artists skills in dealing directly with their fans rather than being commoditized in a B2B way? We must talk to Spotify. Thinking more, we must talk to our fans.
Well, I think this whole pandemic situation provided a perfect opportunity for artists to think more creatively about their monetization approach, and especially the way they are staying in touch with their audience. I think this you will consider this quite relatable, because this spring, the majority of our artists and promoters were like, oh, that's quite a fleeting experience. I mean, we'll be okay by the beginning of summer or by fall. For example, in spring, one of my major consideration was artists are the opinion leaders. They need to talk carefully to their fan communities and support them, educate them, because we're in this together. This is something we all experience, and that actually worked in a very interesting way, because I feel that many Ukrainian artists became more connected to their local fan communities. So that was great. But then when it comes to monetization, I know that especially when it comes to DIY artists, many of them started working with opened accounts on Patreon, opened accounts on Bandcamp. So they started trying to figure out how to handle that, or even doing some tutorials and private lessons, music lessons. So I think that opened a door for new possibilities here, which is absolutely great, because I think many of those prefer to postpone these opportunities because we have concerts. Why would we, I don't know, waste our time on something else? But then another aspect on that is that everything is, well, it all depends on the level of the artist. For example, established ones, um, I don't think that I don't know, the mainstream pop artists or bands would open up a Patreon account waiting for somebody to donate the money. But they came up with other solutions instead. For example, there are some great projects with brands. So they're doing like endorsement, advertising campaigns, and things like that. So everybody found their path in terms of monetization, although it is definitely hard to compare with the live industry income.
Peter, that's a description of revenue. You also need capital investment to start off in any business, including as an artist. You need to be able to hire a van, to buy a guitar, etc., etc. Your radio station is in Canada,
Yeah.
and without going into the details, because you're not from Canada, but can you give us an overview of the systems for funding artists that you're aware of in Canada?
I mean, Canada it's a crazy example how many good things they have for how to support their artist community and the professional community. What we're looking into Sweden, for example, is that the government has given quite a lot of money to artists to get from the crisis, but the people that works in the industry, like sound engineers, lighting engineers, and people like that, those are suffering even harder. So even the artists are now giving away some of their money they got from the government to these people to just survive. While in Canada, they have sold these things much more easily and have a much better system in grant system for it. It's a reason also why we did it in Canada, is because even a radio station has some grant system that we can actually benefit from to keep it running, and also doing testing of things, and that's allow us to play music that maybe I wasn't, you always have to the that play 80s, you have to play more 80s. Grant is anything from Ukraine. It doesn't really matter in that kind of sense. So system, but at the same time we're seeing also try to figure out how to work it out. How are we, they have the money, it's just that how do we going to distribute it to the right people? One problem in Sweden was that they gave out a lot of money to all the people that can show that they had concerts. Of course, that was the major big artists that actually really didn't need the money. They all had big accounts, but of course they can show on paper like, yeah, I had 17 concerts this summer, I'm going to lose this much money. While an independent artist in March, they maybe didn't have booked everything. So they are more or less like, I can't prove anything, so I don't get anything. And the government here at least start to look into like, okay, that's a problem. How do we gonna solve so the right people gets the money that needed it the most?
With Canada, they've got artists like The Weeknd, Drake, Bieber, huge global acts. Are they throwing money? They've done this for many years. Are they putting money into entertainment, into music, because they think it earns them export money, or are there other values that they're trying to surface?
I think it's other values. It's actually not. I mean, of course, the export stuff as well. They get really angry when you say it's like, oh, Justin Bieber is an American artist. It's not. because most of the artists that are from Canada are mistaken in Europe for American artists because we don't see the difference. At the same time, it's also about infrastructure because it's such a large country. They need to facilitate, because there's only people living in the east and the west coast. In the middle is almost nothing. So they need to facilitate money so people actually can, even those communities can have a good live scene and arts and stuff into that. So I think it's a thing also that they want to get a good environment for the people that lives in Canada, and that's the
There's
thing.
A cultural value alongside a commercial value. Garcia, in Ukraine or in your experience with other regional export offices, are any governments behaving anything like the Canadians? Who's doing a good job?
I nearly said let's talk in 10 years, but apparently I'm supposed to answer right now. So here's the thing. Let's generalize this question quite a bit, because the music industry and government conversation takes quite a lot of efforts, especially this year. For example, early May, Ukrainian music professionals did a flash mob that was called Stop Cultural Quarantine, because we had no clear recovery program out of the lockdown, and obviously music industry was one of those that suffered quite a lot due to the lockdown. So on one night, 25 cities across the Ukraine shone beams of light to the sky, because the slogan of it was, if they can't hear us, they will see us. And the image was absolutely fascinating. We everybody wrote about it, but still it took some time to get noticed by the government and for them to start doing something. So for example, in terms of recovery programs, the government established the grants for institutional support for the whole cultural sector. I think the budget is around 180,000 euros. And again, that's not for the music industry itself, but that's for the whole cultural segment. But that's still better than none. We also have some funding from anti-COVID fund, and also some international institutions introduced some grant programs. For example, House of Europe did so. But again, it's rather a conversation about surviving and saving industry as it is, rather than implementing some international projects and including export activities.
At the moment, the governments have got a lot of people talking to them from very large industries, dealing with hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people's income. If we look at music as a relatively small industry, you're going to be towards the back of the queue in terms of people that they need to speak to. Is there much formality in how people in your music industry work? Can they demonstrate? Peter touched earlier on that some of the bigger artists can say, oh, I earned this, here's all my tax returns, you need to give me the equivalent. In a industry where a lot of people are working cash in hand, is there any data to validate their loss?
Basically, this is something we are working right now, because my second company, Soundbus, cooperated with the Ukrainian Cultural Foundation. And this year we're doing a research about Ukrainian music industry as it is, because apparently nobody ever did that. So we don't have any vivid statistics, figures, and facts about the logic of behind the music industry. And we had this initiative as a plan way back when everything was safe and sound and nobody thought about pandemic. Now that we have it, there was a mixed feeling at the beginning. My first intention was, wow, what if we're doing something wrong? What if we shouldn't do the research? But then I understood really fast that actually we need this research more than ever, because this is a perfect opportunity to advocate the music industry to the government, to the legal bodies, because we will have data. We will know that the losses, the problems, the opportunities that the government might be missing, ignoring the live sector, for example. So this is something that we're trying to measure and analyze now, because at this point, plenty of my colleagues are developing new projects, new legislations, new measure reliefs, and they're trying to pitch it to the government, but all they can do is solely focus on their own experience, their private data sources, and that's not a full picture that you're showing to the government. And in my opinion, this is so wrong.
So a single entity, a group, has to come together to lead such a project, but you're saying it's important that you're not just sharing your personal information, you get the whole industry together and unified. I suppose some of that you can do through personal relationships, like with the festivals and stuff. You probably know most of them. How do you go about ringing the bell to get the industry to come together and discuss these things? You can't just send somebody an email, hi, send me all your earnings.
No, it's already there. It's a difference right now. What I'm feeling is that yes, the people that are more or less talking, they want the old things to come back. And it's the same feeling that I had like 2002 when the industry was complaining like, oh, Napster is taking over, and then it was Pirate Bay. But we saw that there's a lot of solutions on the ground. And I had a meeting with this guy 2007, and he presented me this stupid idea that you can stream music for a commercial, like commercials should be between the songs. That was, of course, Spotify. Today, you don't laugh at me. They were laughing at them until 2012. That's 5 years they laughed. But then even the majors had to go with what they were doing. Today, it's standard. So now it's impossible to think that we actually laughed at them. But this is the same thing. We haven't seen a change in the live industry for 50 years. This is the first disruption, because I mean, the live industry during the 2000s, during the Napster era and other things, they just laughed at the record labels because, well, it's not our problem. We still have the artists going here playing live. So this is the first time we're seeing a lot of these structures be changing. And what you're going to see is like, yeah, there's going to be a lot of people that own a lot of stuff into the old industry that wants money to try to keep coming back. Then you have all the other people that are suffering right now, but will come up with smart ideas like Spotify. It's like, let's try this and I try that. We're probably going to see a lot of new of that stuff. And back in the days there, I mean, the government didn't support the record labels. They just said like, you have too much money anyway. But in this case, I would rather see that, yes, we pull things together and starting to do things in a slightly different way and actually put the money into the new stuff and try to make something better. Because one of the things that we got from these garden concerts is the environment thinking. We have already the debate before the pandemic that the big festivals are not good for the environment. You're driving 70 to 100,000 people to one spot. Is it not better to just drive 10 people to the audience instead? And that's just what's going on here as well. I mean, the artists, instead of doing one gig each month on a festival, they can actually do 30 gigs, one each day. But they are the ones traveling around meeting the audience instead of putting the audience going somewhere, which has some to do with the environment. And we have to think about that kind of thing. So right now, when we are in this disruption, let's start thinking clearly, how can we actually benefit and actually make it better? So even the music industry are taking some actions so the environment's going to get better and get more gigs and actually getting more, the money goes out to more pockets than it has been before. So we have golden opportunities right now. And I can tell you that, yes, the new industry, the younger ones, are talking to each other heavily, but they're talking in a way that, oh, let's do this, let's make this. oh, let's build this network, let's talk together. While since I've been so old into the business, I'm also with them, and they are just complaining. They are like, oh, my festival that has been around for 40 years and has that gonna
Peter,
die.
give me a really brief description of when you first went to Bucharest and you met the Romanian industry. What was your impression, the overall impression?
The impression was that this was a country that was like, for me, it was going back in time 10 years. They were discussing things that I was like, okay, we discussed this in Sweden for 10 years, and I knew the answers. Came back next year and suddenly realized, oh, they jumped 7 years. Now we're only 3 years back. And when it came back a third time, you realized, oh, they're up to date now. Now we're talking that I actually are interested to export my stuff to their country, and I want to import their stuff. Suddenly it becomes that. Yeah.
Does that make sense to you, Dacia, that impression of...
You're like describing my life. I find it so relatable in terms of these like two generations, because this is exactly the type of people I'm talking to. And I'm really disappointed about the approach, let's wait until things are going back to normal, because I don't think they will in the nearest future. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, yes, if you are willing to work in a traditional old way, probably we're done. That's bad for you. But if you're on a more progressive and positive side, there are plenty of things you can come up with. I'm actually fascinated with seeing the way my colleagues started working on. For example, probably one of the most popular mainstream artists is doing VR AR concert these days, and here's the first one to do that at this level and introduce the technologies like that to the massive audience. I think he's been doing like arenas at this point, and now he's like, okay, forget about it. You need a Google Cardboard or something like that. My other colleagues are doing online stream marathons for 2 or 3 days in a row, combining several cities and now even several countries all together, and providing an opportunity for emerging artists to perform and find a new audience. So plenty of things are happening. It's just a matter of whether you can see the opportunity or you're like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna wait for somebody to save me. I'm on the positive side.
I think that is the thing right now. It's more or less like we have, yes, and I usually say older people, but in reality it's not. It's like there are people. It's no age difference. It's your mindset, how you want it to be, and of course this was the same thing when we got Spotify. I mean, the older generation was still into like, no, I'm gonna listen to my vinyls, my cassette tapes, but slowly they are going over to the new things as well. Then of course the hipster came back with the cassette tapes now, but that's another story. But this is the thing, you have to see that right now you are in the opportunity to reach people that normally wouldn't look onto you. When I started my festival, I got answers that I would never ever expect. These large companies that usually just say like, yeah, you use small showcase festivals, you have 100 bands, you nothing, suddenly started to answer me like, oh, that's interesting, because we don't have any festivals for artists. Here's a list of anything you can get for almost half price. And you're like, what's happening? And this is because of we will jump these things that are, and you can create something right now. If you have a good idea, you have a pretty good chance to do something cool right now that was impossible just 6 months ago because of the old established things. But as we talked before, this is an acceleration because this was already ongoing. This is what I met when I found out when I was a master in the music business the first time. It's like I met so many people.
I'm hearing this point about acceleration. There's disruption, but the changes that you're seeing, you mentioned the VR, we knew of them last year. It's just now there's an urgency to them, the acceleration. But
and you're gonna see that in the whole community. Suddenly,
we're also hearing that the communities, and it's ridiculously simplistic to base it on countries like the UK and Sweden versus, say, Ukraine and Romania, because there's massive diversity in how people think and what opportunities they have in all those markets. But as a sweeping generalization, it does seem to me that the old model still pervades in the older markets, and that they're slower to disrupt, even though, like you, Peter, that you've been through it many times, and so you're enjoying it to an extent. You're grabbing the opportunity. Dacia, is how much do people in Ukraine or neighboring countries look to these old models that Peter's saying aren't really perfect, and how much confidence do you guys have in developing your own industry in a new way?
Well, if we're talking about the supply-demand situation, at one point, I think people, especially the young ones, are pretty open for new opportunities and new interesting experience. But that's hard to know for sure until you offer them something. For example, just this summer, my colleagues came up with a concept of a vertical concert. And this is something that never has been done in Ukraine ever. And now that's quite a thing. And it goes like this. Actually, we have a hotel called Bratislava in Kiev. And there's a restaurant on the first floor. So organizers made a stage here. And then when you're standing on the roof, you can see the hotel itself. And it's like 9 floors up. So people are buying not a tickets to the concert, but a hotel rooms. They come out to the balcony and they can see the live performance on the rooftop. So all safe and sound, social distancing, these wonderful things. We have some limitations. For example, you can stay up to 4 people in one hotel room, but that's quite an experience. And I know that people are going crazy about going to a concert like that, because this is something completely new and unknown. But again, if somebody would have asked me 6 months earlier, do you consider that's quite a thing? Will people attend concerts like this? Who would have known? Because we have plenty of events in a traditional way. But now we're here, and that's quite a thing.
And also we don't know that. Yeah, and one of the things though that we also have to consider in this kind of thing is that the audience has also changed. Suddenly people have discovered, oh, it was quite easy to order food from home to get it to your door. So when the pandemic is over, why should I go down to the store again? Yeah, I can order it from my computer. Why should I do this? Why should I do that? I can see a concert from São Paulo in Brazil because I saw it during the pandemic. We probably also have to add things that we discover over this. So, for example, my festival will have, even though it will be live, if we will have meetings, we have the normal stuff that we usually have. We also added on a digital side, so each and all of the panels, all the things are streamed. So you can sit in São Paulo because you can't go to Sweden because of some reason, money, whatever, and you can still see it. Because people will demand it because they are starting to get used to it. And this is the things what I'm talking about, acceleration, because it would happen anyway. People starting slowly to adapt to things, but now we are pushing them forward, so they will start to learn faster. Of course, this will also disrupt the city's inner centers. We see right now that people are less and less shopping. Yeah, that means that some of the stores will close down. That means that spaces inside the city will be cheaper to hire to open up a gig place. But then you have the problem maybe with the noise levels and other things. All this is the things that we should talk to the leaders and the government people to make it easier to start up things when it happens right now, because that's going to benefit us for getting more opportunities for our artists to come out and meet the audience, both digitally but also live.
So two great reasons for coming together, sharing information, vertical concerts, these hybrid festivals, but also so that you can speak with one voice to government and to other stakeholders. Gotcha.
Yeah, one more thing to add. When I've been discussing this topic with my colleagues, we came up to the conclusion that probably it's not a good idea to try to replicate offline experience in an online world. I think during the lockdown, where plenty of online gigs started to happen, everybody was like, yeah, but that's not going to work, because being at a real venue, experiencing the live performance is not the same as in viewing online gig. And partially that is true, but that doesn't mean that online concerts won't be, I don't know, popular or requested by the audience, but we need to come up with some different approach. For example, some of my artists try to do a live stream and invite fan representatives, fan communities to the live streams. They've been doing some interactive projects with one another, and that's quite a unique experience that you cannot have offline. So instead of trying to replicate things, we certainly need to be more creative in this aspect.
Gotcha. In Sweden and the UK 10 years ago, you'd have been performing these activities, trying to attract the attention of a record label. A record label would invest in the recordings. There would be enough money there for the artist to invest in taking their career further forward. So the investment came in intellectual property, it came in the compositions, the music publishing, and it came in the sound recordings, the record labels. The stuff that you guys are describing is fairly scattered around fan engagement, and you've mentioned brands a few times. How are you aware of any model for artists to receive investment based on the quality of the relationship they have with their audience, the size of their audience, or their relevance to a particular segment of the audience? Or are people just building revenue streams and saving and maybe waiting for a traditional investment, which would be a label or a publisher?
You see, we're a pretty wild market. We don't have established paths like you just described. Yes, we definitely have some like labels and publishers working on, but the majority of artists does not expect that somebody will come and save them and make them and turn them into huge stars. So basically, fan community is all that they have. It's just the people they can rely on, and at the end of the day, it's they who buy tickets, merch, and support their activities. So when it comes to deals with brands, that's rather a consequence of a very strong communication with the fan community rather than the opposite. And I would say, the way I see it, many brands monitor the market, and then they proactively come over to particular artists knowing like, okay, we can make a deal. You look really interesting for me, because like probably our audience somehow can collide
What
and
would
things
be,
like that.
Gotcha, what would be some tips for a brand is going to recognize your audience and see there's a fit? Are there other things they'd be looking for in terms of professionalism? And
I think it's a matter of compatibility, because depending on the brand, basically the brand will analyze the artist's activity, his background, his values, his history, and what he's been throughout all of this time. That's one. Two, his social media, his plans for the future. But most importantly, they will basically compare the brand audience and the artist audience. So that's pretty much straightforward. Nothing has been changed.
Peter,
Yeah.
go through business.
No, I mean, and the thing is though that the labels don't invest in artists in that kind of sense any longer. I mean, right now, the big this is what the big labels in Sweden are doing. The only thing they look at is on TikTok. It's like how do I develop the artist on TikTok, which is a kind of a you're thinking like, but is that a good strategy if TikTok then gets banned in USA? It's already banned in India. But of course, their market thing is short money in a short way. So they rather take an artist that has 3 million followers on TikTok, make money out of them on 6 months, and then throw them out. That's part of their new strategy. At the same time, so for an artist and the management is like to build that artist to that level, and then take the decisions like, yeah, should we take help, because they can help when you have that amount of followers, but they can't help you if you're like just newly started and has a really great song or anything like that. They are not interested. They don't want to get the development for it, really. They don't want to invest in this kind of stuff.
So Gus is
and that, but probably it will come new ways to invest, and I think that's also one of the things this crisis will put forward, other things that will develop artists. We don't know. I can't really tell what it's going to be, but I'm pretty sure that it will happen, and in a way that I can't imagine. I mean, I couldn't imagine Spotify 2006 that is going to be this big today. It's the same thing here. I can't really imagine what's happening, but in 10 years, if we sit here around, we will laugh about like, yeah, we didn't see that coming. But that's the truth of it, because we can't always see things.
Spotify is directly competing with iTunes, is competing with YouTube. Each artist is not really competing, because the consumer needs lots of artists. They won't just listen to one exclusively. Maybe a Magnets fan would only listen to Magnets, Peter's band. But so the competition thing within the artists that you guys are working with doesn't exist in the visceral way it exists in some other sectors, which is maybe a way for managers, artists to think about how they cooperate and build that community, particularly through this time. We're hearing very clearly that the disruption was happening anyway. It's just sped up. We're moving towards a business to consumer model. The old markets, UK, Sweden, don't necessarily have that nailed down. There's an opportunity for Romania, Ukraine, other markets to be very innovative and to get ahead on that. Brands operate locally and internationally, and they want to always have relevance in their local market. So rather than an artist being frustrated, an artist in Bucharest, that they can't get the attention of someone in New York to put them on a pan-European playlist, there is an opportunity to develop in their market and to keep exchanging information. Trade associations, Music Managers Forum Romania, conferences, this one, MMB. Great opportunity.
It's what is all going to happen is also, we are in a global world. That already happened. What we're going to see is like new networks going together and starting working with each other. And here's the opportunity, even for a Romanian band or Ukrainian band or Swedish band or an artist or management, be aware to try to tap into these networks, offer what you can offer, and help these people, and they will help you. That's probably what we're going to see in the end of the whole thing, that there's new networks on the rising. Are you part of it or you're not?
Darcia, a last word from you.
I think this has been the most positive crisis discussion I've ever heard throughout this whole lockdown. I absolutely love that we're on the same page in terms of new opportunities and thinking globally and trying to adjust your mindset to everything that's happening. Because yes, we are definitely on the edge of going to the new world. And this is definitely something that we need to treat as a good thing rather than a bad thing.
Just repeating those closing 2 points from you both, that you're describing opportunity, and you're saying that there's a leveling of the playing field, that you're no longer the artist is in Kiev, how do they get out of Kiev, the artist is in Bucharest. You can operate globally and find your fans based on your genre rather than your national flag, country, etc. I think that is really positive. So happy to talk to both of you. Thank you so much for your time and all your information. Thank you.
Thanks.